Welcome to my jank tutorial on how I draw faces. So I'm going to kind of split this up into two sections, starting with the basic section. And for basic, I figure we'll start with what I like to consider the how to draw book style that you would get in like a Michael's store or something, or a how to draw manga book, which is just this circle, center line, drawing the jaw. It's kind of square like. Put in your ears, your eyes. It's very basic. And usually they just draw it out like this. They'll be like, draw a circle, draw a triangle. You know that meme where it's like, draw a circle, draw the rest of the fucking owl? That kind of happens a lot with these sort of very simple how to draw books. So I want to break it down a little bit more to kind of say why the books do this. So we're going to look at anatomy. I know that's like everybody's least favorite term. That's the big, bad, scary one. But we're not going to go super complex, partially because even I need to study my anatomy more. But we will attempt some basic breakdowns. So I've got my skull here. This is just a PNG I stole off the internet. And we're gonna redline it. Actually, I don't know if I'm using that term right, but we're gonna go over in red, and I'm gonna show you the general areas that you're paying attention to when you draw a how to draw style face. So we've got our circle here. You'll see that a lot of people start with a circle, especially when you're first beginning, and even later on, I'll still draw with a circle as my starting point half the time. Then we'll draw our center line, our chin, cheekbones, and connect that up to the circle zone. So really, it's all based on the skull, right? So we can see where we draw our eye line, where we draw our ears, where everything should be lining up. But obviously, we are not always going to have a skull PNG under our drawings, especially if you, let's say, are drawing traditionally. You're not gonna carry printouts of skulls and put them on top of your books and then use tracing paper and all of that shit. That's too much effort. We need to have some shortcuts, essentially. So now that I've drawn in all of these basic guidelines, we're going to move this off the skull, and I'm going to show you some basic thoughts to have about this, or basic tips and tricks. So we can look at what we consider the corners of the mouth and the centers of the eye. These should line up in an average, or in sort of the stereotypical how to draw style. Now, I do want to emphasize that in stereotypical how to draw styles, they're usually based off of Caucasian European features. So these are rules that are meant to be broken eventually, but it's a good starting point. Another thing you can look at is that the outer corners of your nose, so that edge of that triangle, should align with the inner corner of the eye. Once again, this might not be for everyone, but it's a good starting point to have, and then you can adjust from there. Your ears are typically going to be placed where the top of the ear is going to align with the top of the eye, about your eye level, and the bottom of the ear is going to align with around the tip of your nose, so your nose level. This will adjust based on perspective, but that's more advanced than what I want to get into. We're just going with a straight-on face. If you can understand the basics of a how to draw style straight-on face, then you can get more complex. Then you have the eye spacing. Usually there's the space of one eye in between both of your eyes. You'll see this sort of line that some artists draw, and some artists will completely change the way they draw the face in general as well. And that's to suggest a curve of sorts. So your skull curves backwards. It's a 3D object. So you have like your forehead, and then usually around your hairline, it's going to start to curve. So you might see some people refer to this as the hairline. And that's where you'll start to draw your hair. So some artists will actually draw their faces in more of a square or rectangular format, similar to this, where they might even make some gesture of where the jawline would be, or they might just leave it completely square. This is basically to really just isolate the facial features, and then you can add in the perspective later. So it's accounting for the curve or for the hairline. We can draw in the little perspective box here. Obviously, with some people, dependent on where it's at, depending on if you're worm's eye view, bird eye view, it's going to change how much of the top of the head we see. But then you can just draw it the rest of the way. So depending on your comfort level and what makes more sense to you, you can either start with a circle and then draw the jaw. You can start with an oval, or you can start with kind of this polygon, sort of curved rectangle shape. All of them very legitimate ways to draw a face. So I want to do some examples as well, and we're going to get into that. Another thing is your neck should usually align with your ears, and the broadness of shoulders in a realistic person is going to be 2 heads wide. Once again, this is not something that is a necessity. Different people have different widenesses, and if you are, or widths, not widenesses, and if you are drawing more cartoony characters, you're going to want to emphasize these things. But it's good to have a general understanding of how they function so that you can emphasize certain things and keep other things a bit more toned down so that it still makes sense whilst getting your point across. So I'm going to draw a very basic how to draw a head style based on what I've just established, with the inner corners of the eye aligning with the outer corners of the nose, with the center of the eye aligning with the outer corners of the mouth, with the hairline being a curve at the top, and with the ears being placed top of the eye, bottom of the nose. Now, something else that you might see, and that I've had people ask me questions about, is how do I know where to put, say, the nose line and the eye line? So if we go up to this skull, you can see that the nose line is usually going to be around the bottom of the circle-ish, and we can draw that circle in. The eye line is going to be about in the bottom third of the circle. So if you're drawing with the circle, that'll give you a general idea. I have mine shifted down a little bit here. You can shift based on how big of maybe a forehead or of a chin you have in your character. So we're just putting in the rest of these features, and then we are going to do some different examples. And what I want to do with these examples is I'm going to have a few faces where I exaggerate different features and where I change some shapes so that you can see what you can do with this very basic template, where you still keep it looking believable, but you can add in some variety. So we'll just finish up this template here, and then I'm going to go into more of a time lapse, and then I'll come back to you once I have drawn in those examples, and we'll talk a little bit more. So we have our faces. Now you can see that I sort of exaggerated certain features. With some of them I made the eyes farther apart, with some of them I made the nose bigger, with some of them I have protruding cheekbones. Some of them I emphasized masculine features, others I emphasized more feminine features. I changed age, all of that stuff. When I really just focused on the main zone, I basically drew a basic white guy. But what we can tell overall is that they all look a little similar, right? They have their differences, but you can kind of tell they're all based off of the same template. So that is where we get into more of the advanced, a little less basic, which I will go into in a second video because I don't want to, have this video be too bogged down. So hopefully this helps with your understanding.